Hello and welcome back to another KCC video. Well, here we are, video 500. Who would have thought 2 years ago when we started this channel that we'd get to such an epic milestone? Thank you to each and every one of you for your support of the channel. While we're not doing anything special for this video, we are announcing that every KCC video going forward will have a sister podcast on Anchor.fm. Our podcasts are currently available on Anchor.fm, Pocket Casts, and Spotify, and will soon be available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Amazon Music. Let's get back to the video. I'm Rob, and today we'll be jumping into malicious compliance. Before we start, please hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you know when the next video goes live. Our first story today comes to us from Elf Forever After. School? Nah, I think Starbucks instead. Let's jump right in. I've seen quite a few back in high school stories lately and thought I'd share my own experience. So to set the stage, I graduated high school in 2013 and my senior year was a challenge. My sister passed away. My health took a nosedive thanks to chronic illnesses that were progressively getting worse. I crashed and totaled a car. Not my fault, but not a fun experience nonetheless. I had 2 concussions. You get the idea. The first half of the year, tardies skyrocketed among the student body. The school changed the student parking areas and basically made it so that any students who drove themselves and any students who used the door closest to that parking lot were caught in a huge bottleneck, and any one student goofing off could potentially keep literally hundreds of students from entering the building. It was ridiculous. Additionally, they decreased the between-class passing period from 7 minutes to 5 minutes. Mind you, if you were to walk from one end of the school to the other when the halls were completely empty, it would take you at least 5 minutes. Add 1,200 other people to the mix, and even 7 minutes was a time crunch. So tardies increased a lot, and the administration got it in their heads that the best way to remedy this situation was to implement new punishments for being late to class. Prior to this year, after 5 tardies, you had to attend an after-school detention with the teacher of whatever class you had missed. That's it. If you skipped class unexcused by a parent or doctor, 5 times you received an in-school suspension. And if you missed more than 20 days of a class, excused or not, you had to repeat the class. There were some exceptions to that, but they were basically catastrophe exceptions. The new rules were ridiculous. If you were tardy to a class 3 times, you received a suspension. If you skipped the class altogether, unexcused, you received a suspension. All it took was once. If you received 3 suspensions, you had to retake the class. But if an absence was excused, then there were no consequences. Oh, and they got rid of the 20-day absence and repeat rule. So on to the fun. I was just burnt out by the end of that first semester. I was stressed and upset and dealing with horrible panic attacks after my sister's death. My body constantly hurt thanks to undiagnosed pain conditions, and I couldn't stay awake in class to save my life. I was just over dealing with BS. I spent the entire first semester running from class to class because my classes were clear across the school from each other. I lived less than 6 miles from the school, but was leaving over an hour before school started because of all the road construction going on between my house and the school. There was no way out of my subdivision that didn't involve a mile or more of closed lanes, plus there was construction on the road leading to the only entrance to the student parking lot. It was BS. I was a bit too tightly wound at the time. I was a straight A student in all the AP classes I could fit in my schedule, and I had never ever been late to class. So being late to a couple classes that first semester was extremely upsetting, but I still hadn't even managed to warrant a detention. End of the first semester rolls around and we're all given a letter notifying us and our parents to the attendance change, except they didn't include the change to the 20 absence and repeat rule. It just wasn't there at all. They were hoping by not including it in the letter, the change would be overlooked. It was not. So second semester rolls around and my class schedule was changed because of human error. And I got thrown in a weightlifting class that I would not have signed up for if you paid me to. I was pissed. I was tired and in pain, and you had better believe lifting heavy objects for an hour a day, 4 days a week, was not my idea of a good time. The weekly swimming day didn't suck though, and then more construction showed up on my routes to school, and I was late. Very late. As in, arrived to school midway through second period. So I'm in the office, in tears, being written up with a suspension thanks to citywide road construction, and the attendance secretary and counselor who oversaw these matters are showing no mercy or leniency. I'm handed the write-up to sign and a copy of the attendance policy in full, and lo and behold, the change to the 20 absence and repeat is on there, as is the word unexcused, as in all unexcused absences will result in a 1-day suspension. Do you see it? Do you see the loophole? I cackled. I flat out cackled. Pulled out my cell phone, called my mom, said, "Hey, I'll explain later, but I need you to call the school and excuse me from first and second period. Thank you. Love you. Bye." And before I could even slide my phone back in my pocket, the attendance line rings. To say the secretary and counselor were pissed would be an understatement, but I wasn't done yet. After gleefully shredding the write-up, I asked if this copy of the attendance policy was mine to keep, and proceeded to highlight the word unexcused and the change to the 20-day absence and repeat policy. I then turned to the counselor. "So, I want to be sure I understand this correctly. If I show up late 3 times, I get suspended, correct?" said very snobbishly. "If I ditch class, I get suspended, correct?" said as he crossed his arms like he was trying to be extra intimidating. "But if I get my mom to call or write me a note excusing me from class, there are no repercussions, correct?" You could see him trying to work out if he still had the upper hand, but good luck getting a parent to agree to that. And it doesn't matter at all how many days I miss. The 20-day absence and repeat rule has been eliminated in full with no replacement. And that's when he understood the loophole I'd found. I kid you not, watching that man crumple as he came to the conclusion that I found a way around the suspensions was the best fall of man I've ever seen. He uncrossed his arms and seemed to deflate straight onto a chair. Correct. Wonderful. Thank you for your time. I've got some time before third period, so I'm gonna go hit the vending machines. Bye. And off I went, strolled into third period with pretzels and a Coke, happy as a clam. That night, my mom wrote me out roughly 50 notes that read, "I excuse OP from blank periods. If you have any questions, please give me a call at work number. Signed, OP's mom." And she repeated writing out these notes a month or so later. I skipped everything. Gonna be cutting close to making it to first period? Skip it. Hit Starbucks instead. Don't want to go to that effing weightlifting class? Don't. Take a 90-minute lunch instead. Overslept? Well, get some breakfast on the way to third period, but then skip that awful weightlifting class and come back for fifth and sixth periods. Need more time to study for a test or finish a project? Skip the morning altogether and only come in for that math test. Go home after second period to get ahead on that project. That weightlifting class, after the first few weeks I attended the swimming days and the game days, soccer or dodgeball, nothing else. Think about that. 1, maybe 2 days a week for the whole semester. If I attended 30 classes total, I'd be surprised. And of course, they called my mom to verify the notes, and she flat out told them that she had supplied me with fill-in-the-blank notes, and she would gladly verify them all as legitimate. The sheer amount of times I hit Starbucks at 9 a.m. on a school day was astounding, and it was done on purpose. I was flaunting that I had skipped classes. Every time I walked into that office with a Starbucks cup and a note, I saw a little glimmer of fury in the secretary's eyes. If the counselor was there, he'd lean against a wall and glare, but he couldn't do anything to stop me. Our district had a strict policy change policy, which meant that any changes to things like attendance policies and dress codes had to be implemented at the start of a semester and had to remain in place for the duration of the semester. That counselor tried to appeal to the school board to change the policy at every single meeting that semester. I attended the first one. One of the school board members lost his crap laughing at the situation. He asked, "What idiot wrote this policy?" And that counselor turned Coke can red. They basically told him that he'd made this mess, he could deal with the fallout. They returned to the previous attendance policy the following school year, but as I was a senior, that didn't matter to me. Naturally, I told others of my discovery, and soon enough, everyone was exploiting this loophole. Of course, some parents wouldn't excuse their kids, but enough would. We all showed up on count day though. My grades stayed at their previous level, and my mental and physical health improved as I was no longer running myself into the ground. All I know is that without that loophole, I would have run myself into the ground and probably ended up in the hospital. That loophole saved my life. And after all I did was ask my mother to excuse my absences. It's not my fault I was allowed more than 20. Ah, yes, skipping and going to the coffee shop, something I did frequently when I was in high school myself. We had a coffee shop called the Bohemian Penguin, and I spent a lot of time there. Probably more time than I spent in the school itself. Ah, grade 12, the best 6 years of my life. Our next story comes to us from Intergalactic Toast. Only wear items of clothing that the school allows? No problem, Mr. Nonce. Let's jump right in. I was a one-man army against school policy at my school. A lot of the policy was harmful towards poorer students and just didn't make sense, and my spectrum brain couldn't handle the stupidity. I was on a thread and recalled the story of a battle between me and one of the bully teachers at school. One time, I didn't want to go to school because my shoes had holes in them. My mom let me wear my trainers and sent me with a note, but she had bad handwriting, so they thought I had faked it. One of the teachers started quoting the dress code at me and threw away my note when I gave it to them. They brought some manky shoes from Lost and Found and tried to make me wear them, so I straight up told them to F off. It pissed him off, so he tried to grab my foot and force one on. So I screamed, "Sir's a nonce, sir's a nonce, he's inappropriately touching me." And while the other students found it hilarious, he didn't, so I got an in-school suspension. He ran the isolation wing, so I ended up going and sitting in this room with him and some others. But the ridiculousness of the whole thing made me completely disillusioned with his authority. Him throwing away my note and grabbing my foot made me fully convinced he didn't give a crap about the policy he was enforcing. So why should I? Started swinging in my chair and singing loudly, and he told me to stop, so I told him to F off. He asked if I wanted to be sent home, so I said no crap, I wanted to be sent home. That's where all my games and stuff were. He said I was there to learn the rules, so sit down and shut up. And I said if I was in there for breaking the rules, why the F would I follow them now? He says that kind of talk would end up putting me in prison. So I said, so would touching kids, you effing nonce. That was the last straw, and he sent me home for the day. I spent the day brushing up on school policy. Turns out for a uniform violation, you're supposed to get a warning. I came back the next day wearing the wrong jumper. He yelled at me. I showed him the policy. He warned me and said he didn't want to see any jumper or shoes that weren't school uniform. So I came back next day wearing different trousers. He yelled at me again, so naturally I asked him to be specific about what he wanted me to wear. He said if it was in the school policy, I could wear it. Great. I started coming in gym clothes and trainers. The same trainers from before. Turns out there's a whole separate uniform for gym days, and most people change on the day, but there is no rule that says you have to, or that you can't wear the uniform on other days. He tried to take me to see the head teacher when he saw me, thinking it was grounds for expulsion, but I was an otherwise good kid grades-wise. So the head teacher asked why I wasn't complying. I said I was just simply confused about the policy. The headmaster took some time to explain it to me while I patiently waited for him to finish. Then I innocently inquired as to what the school's policy was around destruction of personal property or touching other students below the belt. Apparently, it's absolutely not allowed, not even a note. Asked if the same rules applied to teachers, it did. So I turned around and asked the other teacher, so why did you put your hands on me and try to physically force me to change? And why did you destroy my note? Headmaster looked at the teacher. Teacher looked at me, then him, then me. Headmaster asked for the room, so I stepped outside. Don't really know what was said, but there was about 10 minutes of yelling, and then I was invited back in. Headmaster asked for the full story, so I gave it to him, including my insubordination, etc., and the whole time, the headmaster was shooting daggers at the other teacher. Turns out, the teacher didn't have nearly as much authority as he claimed he did. When he sent students home, he had been altering their files to mark them as absent for the day and had been going behind the headmaster's back to dole out extra punishments. Nobody else had questioned his authority before because he was a bit of a bully, and I'd been the first one stubborn enough to call him on his BS. He didn't get fired, but he got some kind of formal warning, and I was allowed to keep wearing gym clothes as a special exception on mental health grounds. Looking back, I'm fairly confident that it was a bribe so we wouldn't sue or report the teacher. All that time the teacher spends paying attention to what you're wearing when they could be, I don't know, teaching, maybe? OP brings up a valid point though, and that's that you should know the rules inside out for your school, your workplace, or anything else in that case. Our last story today comes to us from Amir. When pigs fly, let's jump right in. So, a little background before I get into the story. As a kid, I very rarely had access to technology, which included anything from phones, this being around the time that Blackberries were the big thing, to TV, we didn't even own a TV, and even now we just have one of those box TVs with the green lines across, and especially video games. Now looking back, I am honestly really glad my parents did that, as I instead turned to reading, and I honestly think that it's very positively impacted my life. I love to read, and I do it really quickly as well, but that's not important to the story. Now, after a ton of convincing and promises that I would follow the rules they set down, they finally let me get a Wii, and boy was I excited to get it. It's still one of my favorite consoles, and games like LEGO Star Wars, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and even Wii Sports and Mario Kart are and will be some of my personal favorites. Sadly, my parents were pretty strict with how much I got to play, and I had quickly become addicted, so any chance I had to play, I would grab hold of. I got especially excited when friends came over, as my parents were often more lax during that time and much more willing to let me and my friend play uninterrupted. Now, we had this one family who my parents were friends with and who had kids almost the same age as my sister and I, so they would often come over to our house as a family, and they would talk and drink while us kids played around. So it happened that they all decided to come visit our house for a while, and so my friend and I get really hyped to play some Wii. But this time, my mom said no, as I had recently been playing a lot. She told us that she wanted us to spend time doing other stuff for a little bit, and we could play later, but this just led to us bothering her every 5 minutes asking to play the Wii. Now, if you've read the title, I'm sure you know what comes next. After like the 5th or 6th time of us asking, she finally decides to just tell us no by saying, "Tell you what, you can play the Wii when pigs fly." Now, a lot of kids would just give up at this point and go try it to find other stuff to do, but I was determined, so I pulled my friend into my room and told him my plan. I had gotten as a gift a while back one of those air-propelled rockets where you slide the rocket onto this tube that leads to this plastic box that you can like jump on or step on to shoot the air through the tube and make the rocket fly. I also had a ton of colored pencils and the creativity of a young child who won't take no for an answer. My friend and I take a sheet of paper and we spend like a good hour actually drawing a beautiful pig with these nice feathery wings, and then we colored it all pretty. We then cut it out and taped it to the rocket, and we were ready for the next step of the plan. Now our parents were sitting in our kitchen and we have a sliding glass door that leads to the backyard. So I tell my friend to go around the house and stand in the back hidden next to the door with the rocket. We decide to just throw it by hand because it was easier to aim in a way that my mom could see it. I then walk into the kitchen and tell my mom that my friend and I found something really cool and she should look through the door to see it. My friend then tosses the rocket through the air and we get to see this winged beauty fly through the air. Honestly, it was not very aerodynamic, as the rocket was sort of broken, as most cheap plastic things get when they are used by a child too many times, but you get the idea. Now, I'm not sure whether my mom was impressed with the fact that I had managed to take her surefire way of saying no and actually make it a reality, or if she was just happy that we had spent our time and effort doing something that wasn't video games. But after laughing for a little bit and congratulating us, she went and got the Wii, and we got to enjoy the rest of the day in the basement collecting studs. This is an adorable story and shows us just how creative a kid with an active imagination can be. Thank you to all three OPs for posting their stories in the Malicious Compliance subreddit. They are linked in the description down below. Please go check them out. Check out the new podcast at the link at the top of the description. Check out one of these other videos, and if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories.